waking, sleeping. Which side of the line are the dreams really on? Dolan's Cadillac. Revenge is a dish best eaten cold. Spanish proverb. I waited and watched for 7 years. I saw him come and go, Dolan. I watched him stroll into fancy restaurants, dressed in a tuxedo, always with a different woman on his arm. Always with his pair of bodyguards bookending him. I watched his hair go from iron gray to a fashionable silver, while my own simply receded until I was bald. I watched him leave Las Vegas on his regular pilgrimage to the West Coast. I watched him return. On 2 or 3 occasions, I watched from a side road as his sedan DeVille, the same color as his hair, swept by on Route 71 towards Los Angeles. And on a few occasions, I watched him leave his place in the Hollywood Hills in the same gray Cadillac to return to Las Vegas. Not often, though. I am a school teacher. School teachers and high-priced hoodlums do not have the same freedom of movement. It's just an economic fact of life. He did not know I was watching him. I never came close enough for him to know that. I was careful. He killed my wife, or had her killed. It comes to the same either way. Do you want details? You won't get them from me. If you want them, look them up in the back issues of the papers. Her name was Elizabeth. She taught in the same school where I taught, and where I teach still. She taught first graders. They loved her, and I think that some of them may not have forgotten their love still. Although they would be teenagers now. I loved her, and I love her still. Certainly. She was not beautiful, but she was pretty. She was quiet, but she could laugh. I dream of her hazel eyes. There has never been another woman for me, nor ever will be. He slipped. Dolan. That's all you have to know. And Elizabeth was there, at the wrong place and the wrong time, to see the slip. She went to the police, and the police sent her to the FBI, and she was questioned. And she said yes, she would testify. They promised to protect her, but they either slipped or they underestimated Dolan. Maybe it was both. Whatever it was, she got into her car one night, and the dynamite wired to the ignition made me a widower. He made me a widower. Dolan. With no witness to testify, he was let free. He went back to his world, I to mine. The penthouse apartment in Vegas for him, the empty track home for me. The succession of beautiful women in furs and sequined evenings dresses for him. The silence for me. The gray Cadillacs, 4 of them over the years for him. And the aging Buick Riviera for me. His hair went silver while mine just went. But I watched. I was careful. Oh, yes, very careful. I knew that he was what he could do. I knew he would step on me like a bug if he saw or sensed what I meant for him. So I was careful. During my summer vacation 3 years ago, I followed him, at a prudent distance, to Los Angeles, where he went frequently. He stayed in his fine house and threw parties. I watched the comings and goings from a safe shadow at the end of the block, fading back when the police cars made their frequent patrols. And I stayed in a cheap hotel where people played their radios too loud and neon light from the topless bar across the street shone in the windows. I fell asleep on those nights and dreamed of Elizabeth's hazel eyes. Dreamed that none of it had ever happened. And woke up sometimes with tears drying on my face. I came close to losing hope. He was well guarded, you see. So well guarded. He went nowhere without those 2 heavily armed guerrillas with him. And the Cadillac itself was armor-plated. The big radial tires it rolled on were of the self-sealing type, favored by dictators in small uneasy countries. Then, that last time, I saw how it could be done. But I did not see it until after I've had a very bad scare. I followed him back to Las Vegas, always keeping at least a mile between us. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3. As we crossed the desert heading east, his car was at times no more than a sun flash on the horizon, and I thought about Elizabeth. How the sun looked on her hair. I was far behind on this occasion. It was the middle of the week, and the traffic on the US 71 was very light. When traffic is light, tailing becomes dangerous. Even a grammar school teacher knows that. I passed an orange sign which read, "Detour, 5 miles," and dropped back even farther. Desert detours slow traffic to a crawl. I didn't want to chance coming up behind the great Cadillac as the driver babied it over some rutted secondary road. "Detour, 3 miles," the next sign read, and below that, "Blasting area ahead, turn off, 2-way radio." I began to muse on some movie I had seen years before. In this film, a band of armed robbers had tricked an armored car into a desert by putting up false detour signs. Once the driver fell for the trick and turned off onto a deserted dirt road. There are 1,000 of them in the desert. Sheep roads, ranch roads, and old government roads that go nowhere. The thieves had removed the signs, assuring isolation, and then had simply laid siege to an armored car until the guards came out. They killed the guards. I remember that. They killed the guards. I reached the detour and turned onto it. The road was as bad as I had imagined, packed dirt, 2 lanes wide, filled with potholes that made my old Buick jounce and groan. The Buick needed new shock absorbers, but shocks are an expense a school teacher sometimes has to put off, even when he is a widower, with no children and no hobbies, except his dreams of revenge. As the Buick bounced and wallowed along, an idea occurred to me. Instead of following Dolan's Cadillac the next time I left Vegas for LA or LA to Vegas, I would pass it get ahead of it. I would create a false detour like the one in the movie, luring it out into the waste, then exit, exist. Silent and rimmed by mountains, west of Las Vegas. Then I would remove the signs as the thieves had done in the movie. Do apologize for the sniffling, guys. I am sick. I snapped back to reality suddenly. Dolan's Cadillac was ahead of me. Directly ahead of me. Pulled off to one side of the dusty track. One of the tires, self-sealing or not, was flat. No, not just flat. It was exploded. Half off the rim. The culprit had probably been a sharp wedge of rock stuck in a hard pan like a miniature tank trap. One of the two bodyguards was working a jack under the front end. The second, an ogre with a pig face streaming sweat under his brush cut, stood protectively beside Dolan himself. Even in the desert, you see, they took no chances. Dolan stood to one side, slim in an open-throated shirt and dark slacks, his silver hair blowing around his head in the desert breeze. He was smoking a cigarette and watching the men as if he were somewhere else. A restaurant, or a ballroom, or a drawing room perhaps. His eyes met mine through the windshield of my car and then slid off with no recognition at all. Although he had seen me once, 7 years ago, when I had hair. At the preliminary hearing, sitting beside my wife, my terror at having caught up with the Cadillac was replaced with an utter fury. I thought of leaning over and unrolling the passenger window and shrieking, "How dare you forget me? How dare you dismiss me?" Oh, but that would have been the act of a lunatic. It was good that he had forgotten me. It was fine that he had dismissed me. Better to be a mouse behind the wainscoting nibbling at the wires. Better to be a spider high up under the eaves spinning its web. The man sweating the jack flagged me. But Dolan wasn't the only one capable of dismissal. I looked indifferently beyond the arm waver, wishing him a heart attack or a stroke, or best of all, both at the same time. I drove on. But my head pulsed and throbbed, and for a few moments, the mountains on the horizon seemed to double and even treble. If I had a gun, I thought. If only I'd had a gun. I could have ended his rotten, miserable life right then if I'd only had a gun. Miles later, some sort of reason reasserted itself if I'd had a gun. The only thing I could have been sure of was getting myself killed. If I had a gun, I could have pulled over when the man using the bumper jack beckoned me and gotten out and began spraying bullets wildly around the deserted landscape. I might have wounded someone. Then I would have been killed and buried in a shallow grave. And Dolan would have gone on escorting the beautiful woman and making pilgrimages between Las Vegas and Los Angeles in his silver Cadillac, while the desert animals unearthed my remains and fought over my bones under the cold moon. For Elizabeth, there would have been no revenge. None at all. The man who traveled with him were trained to kill. I was trained to teach third graders. This was not a movie, I reminded myself as I returned to the highway and passed an orange "End Construction, the state of Nevada thanks you" sign. And if I ever made the mistake of confusing reality with a movie, of thinking that a balding third grade teacher with mafia could ever be Dirty Harry anywhere outside of his own daydreams, there would never be any revenge. Ever. But could there be revenge? Ever? Could there be? My idea of creating a fake detour was as romantic and unrealistic as the idea of jumping out of my old Buick and spraying the three of them with bullets. Me, who had not fired a gun since the age of 16, and who had never fired a handgun. Such a thing would not be possible without a band of conspirators. Even the movie I had seen, romantic as it had been, had made that clear. There had been 8 or 9 of them in 2 separate groups, staying in touch with each other by walkie-talkie. There had even been a man in a small plane cruising above the highway to make sure the armored car was relatively isolated as it approached the right spot on the highway. A plot, no doubt, dreamed up by some overweight screenwriter sitting by his swimming pool with a pina colada by one hand and a fresh supply of pencil pens and an Edgar Wallace plot wheel by the other. And even that fellow had needed a small army to fulfill his idea. I was only one man. It wouldn't work. It was just a momentary false gleam, like the others I'd had over the years. The idea that maybe I could put some sort of poison gas in Dolan's air conditioning system, or plant a bomb in his Los Angeles house, or perhaps obtain some really deadly weapon, a bazooka, let us say, and turned his damn silvered Cadillac into a fireball as it raced east towards Vegas or west towards LA along 71. Best to dismiss it. But it wouldn't go. Cut him out, the voices inside that spoke for Elizabeth kept whispering. Cut him out the way an experienced sheepdog cuts an ewe out of a flock when his master points. Detour him out into the emptiness and kill him. Kill them all. Wouldn't work. If I allowed no other truth, I would at least have to allow that a man who had stayed alive as long as Dolan must have a carefully honed sense of survival. Honed to the point of paranoia, perhaps. He and his men would see through the detour trick in a minute. They turned down this one today, the voice that spoke for Elizabeth responded. They never even hesitated. They went just like Mary's little lamb. But I knew, yes, somehow I did, that men like Dolan, men who are really more like wolves than men, develop a sort of sixth sense when it comes to danger. I could steal genuine detour signs from some road department shed and set them up in all the right places. I could even add fluorescent orange road cones and a few of those smudge pots. I could do all of that and Dolan would still smell the nervous sweat of my hands on the stage dressing. Right through his bulletproof windows, he would smell it. He would close his eyes and hear Elizabeth's name far back in the snake pit that passed for his mind. The voice that spoke with Elizabeth fell silent, and I thought it had finally given up for the day. And then, with Vegas actually in sight, blue and misty and wavering on the fair rim of the desert, it spoke up again. "Then don't try to fool him with a fake detour," it whispered. "Fool him with a real one." I swerved the Buick over to the shoulder and shuddered to a stop with both feet on the brake pedal. I stared into my own wide, startled eyes in the rearview mirror. Inside, the voice that spoke for Elizabeth began to laugh. It was wild, mad laughter. But after a few moments, I began to laugh along with it. The other teachers laughed at me when I joined the 9th Street Health Club. One of them wanted to know if someone had kicked sand in my face. I laughed along with them. People don't get suspicious of a man like me, as long as he keeps laughing along with them. And why shouldn't I laugh? My wife had been dead 7 years, hadn't she? Why? She was no more than dust and hair and a few bones in her coffin. So why shouldn't I laugh? It's only when a man like me stops laughing that people wonder if something is wrong. I laughed along with them even though my muscles ached all that fall and winter. I laughed even though I was constantly hungry. No more second helpings. No more late night snacks. No more beer. No more before dinner gin and tonic. But lots of red meat and greens. Greens, greens. I bought myself a Noctilus machine for Christmas. No, that's not quite right. Elizabeth bought me a Noctilus machine for Christmas. I saw Dolan less frequently. I was too busy working out, losing my pot belly, building up my arms and chest and legs. But there were times when it seemed I could not go on with it. That recapturing anything like real physical fitness was going to be impossible. That I could not 5 without second helpings. And pieces of coffee cake and the occasional dollop of sweet cream in my coffee. I believe there's a typo with the book there, guys, so I apologize. When those times came, I would park across from one of his favorite restaurants, or perhaps go into one of the clubs he favored and wait for him to show up. Stepping from the fog-gray Cadillac with an arrogant icy blonde or a laughing redhead on his arm, or one on each. There he would be, the man who had killed my Elizabeth. There he would be, resplendent in a formal shirt from Bijan's, his gold Rolex winking in the nightclub lights. When I was tired and discouraged, I went to Dolan as a man with a raging thirst might seek out an oasis in the desert. I drank his poisoned water and was refreshed. In February, I began to run every day. And then the other teachers laughed at my bald head, which peeled and pinked and then peeled and pinked again, no matter how much sunblock I smeared on it. I laughed right along with them, as if I had not twice nearly fainted and spent long, shuddering minutes with cramps stubbing the muscles of my legs at the end of my runs. When summer came, I applied for a job with the Nevada Highway Department. The Municipal Employment Office stamped a tentative approval on my form and sent me along to a district foreman named Harvey Blocker. Blocker was a tall man, burned almost black by the Nevada sun. He wore jeans, dusty work boots, and a blue t-shirt with cut-off sleeves. Bad attitude, the shirt proclaimed. His muscles were big, rolling slabs under his skin. He looked at my application. Then he looked at me and laughed. The application looked very punny, rolled up in one of his huge fists. Puny, sorry. You gotta be kidding, my friend. I mean, you have got to be. We talking desert sun and desert heat here. None of that yuppie tanning salon shit. What are you in real life, Bubba? An accountant? A teacher, I said. 3rd grade. Oh, honey, he said, and laughed again. Get out of my face, okay? I had a pocket watch, handed down from my great-grandfather, who worked on the last stretch of the great Transcontinental Railroad. He was there. According to family legend, when they hammered home the golden spike, I took the watch out and dangled it in Blocker's face on his chain. See this? I said. Worth $600, maybe $700. This is a bribe? Blocker laughed again. A great old laugher was he. Man, I've heard of people making deals with the devil, but you're the first one I ever met who wanted to bribe himself into hell. Now he looked at me with something like compassion. You may think you understand what you're trying to get yourself into, but I'm here to tell you, you don't have the slightest idea. In July, I seen it go 117 degrees out there west of Indian Springs. It makes strong men cry. And you ain't strong, Bubba. I don't have to see you with your shirt off to know you ain't got nothing on your rack but a few yuppie health club muscles. And they won't cut it out in the big empty. I said, the day you decide I can't cut it, I'll walk off the job. You keep the watch, no argument. You're a fucking liar. I looked at him. He looked back for some time. You're not a fucking liar, he said, this in tones of amazement. No. You'd give the watch to Tinker to hold? He cocked his thumb at a humongous black man in a tie-dyed shirt who was sitting nearby in a cab of a bulldozer, eating a fruit pie from McDonald's and listening. Is he trustworthy? You're damn tootin'. Then he could hold it until you tell me to take a hike or until I have to go back to school in September. And what do I put it? Up. I pointed to the employment application in his fist. Sign that, I said. That's what you put up. You're crazy. I thought of Dolan, and if Elizabeth had said nothing. You'd start on shit work? Blocker warned. Shoveling hot patch out of the back of a truck and into potholes? Not because I want your damned watch, although I'll be more than happy to take it, but because that's where everyone starts. All right. As long as you understand, Bubba. I do. No, Blocker said, you don't. But you will. And he was right. I remember next to nothing about the first couple of weeks. Just shoveling hot top and tamping it down and walking along behind the truck with my head down until the truck stopped at the next pothole. Sometimes we worked on the strip, and I'd hear the sound of jackpot bells ringing in the casinos. Sometimes I think the bells were just ringing in my head. I'd look up and I'd see Harvey Blocker looking at me with that odd look of compassion, his face shimmering in the heat baking off the road. And sometimes I'd look over at the tinker, sitting under the canvas parasol which covered the cab of his dozer, and tinker would hold up my great-granddad's watch and swing it on the chain so it kicked off sun flashes. The big struggle was not to faint, to hold on consciously. No matter what. Although June, I held on. All through June, I held on. And the first week of July, Ellen Blocker sat down next to me one lunch hour while I was eating a sandwich with one shaking hand. I shook sometimes until 10 at night. It was the heat. It was either shake or faint. And when I thought of Dolan, I somehow managed to keep shaking. "You still ain't strong, Bubba," he said. "No," I said. "But like the man said, you should have seen the materials I had to start with." "I keep expecting to look around and see you passed out in the middle of the roadbed, and you keep not doing it. But you're gonna." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. If you stay behind the truck with a shovel, you're gonna." "No. Hottest part of the summer's still coming on, Bubba. Tink calls it cookie sheet weather." "I'll be fine." He pulled something out of his pocket. It was my great-granddad's watch. He tossed it in my lap. "Take this fucking thing," he said. Disgusted. "I don't want it." "You made a deal with me. I'm calling it off." "If you fire me, I'll take you to arbitration," I said. "You signed my form. I ain't firing you," he said, and looked away. "I'm going to have Tink teach you how to run a front-end loader." I looked at him for a long time, not knowing what to say. My third grade classroom, so cool and pleasant, had never seemed so far away. And still I didn't have the slightest idea of how a man like Blocker thought. Or what he meant when he said the things he said. I knew that he admired me and held me in contempt at the same time. But I had no idea why he felt either way. "You don't need to care, darling," Elizabeth spoke up suddenly inside my mind. "Dolan is your business, remember, Dolan?" Why do you want to do that?" I asked at last. He looked back at me then, and I saw he was both furious and amused. But the fury was the emotion on top, I think. "What is it with you, Bubba? What do you think I am?" "I don't. You think I want to kill you for your fucking watch? That what you think?" "I'm sorry." "Yeah, you are. Sorriest little motherfucker I ever saw." I put my great-granddad's watch away. "You ain't never gonna be strong, Bubba. Some people and plants take hold in the sun. Some wither up and die. You dying. You know you are. And still you won't move into the shade. Why? Why you pulling this crap on your system?" "I got my reasons." "Yeah, I bet you do. And God help anyone who gets in your way." He got up and walked off. Tinker came over, grinning. "You think you can learn to run a front-end loader?" "I think so," I said. "I think so too," he said. "Old blockhead there's like you. He just don't know how to say no. Say so." I noticed. Tink laughed. "Tough little motherfucker, ain't you?" I hope so, I said. I spent the rest of summer driving a front-end loader, and when I went back to school that fall, almost as black as Tink himself, the other teachers stopped laughing at me. Sometimes they looked at me out of the corners of their eyes after I passed by, but they had stopped laughing. I've got my reasons, that's what I told him. And I did. I did not spend that season in hell just on a whim. I had to get in shape, you see. Preparing to dig a grave for a man or a woman may not require such drastic measures. But it was not just a man or a woman I had in mind. It was that damned Cadillac I meant to bury. By April of the following year, I was on the State Highway Commission's mailing list. Every month I receive a bulletin called Nevada Road Signs. I skimmed most of the material, which concerned itself with pending highway improvement bills, road equipment that had been bought and sold, state legislature actions on such subjects as sand dune control and new anti-erosion techniques. What I was interested in was always on the last page or two of the bulletin. This section, simply titled The Calendar, listed the dates and sites of roadwork in each coming month. I was especially interested in sites and dates followed by a simple 4-letter abbreviation, RPAV. This stood for repaving, and my experience on Harvey Blocker's crew had shown me that these were the operations which most frequently called for detours. But not always. No, indeed. Closing a section of the road is a step the Highway Commission never takes unless there is no other choice. But sooner or later. I thought those 4 letters might spell the end of Dolan. Just 4 letters. But there were times when I saw them in my dreams. RPAV. Not that it would be easy, or perhaps even soon. I knew I might have to wait for years, and that someone else might get Dolan in the meantime. He was an evil man, and evil men live dangerous lives. 4 loosely relative vectors would have to come together. Related vectors, sorry. Like a rare conjunction of the planets. Travel for Dolan. Vacation time for me. A national holiday. And a 3-day weekend. Years, maybe. Or maybe never. But I felt a kind of serenity. A surety that it would happen. And that when it did, I would be prepared. And eventually it did happen. Not that summer. Not that fall. And not that following spring. But in June of last year, I opened Nevada Road Signs and saw this in the calendar. July 1st, July 22nd, 10, US 71 MI 440, 472, westbound RPAV. Hand shaking, I paged through my desk calendar to July and saw that July 4th fell on a Monday. So here were 3 of the 4 vectors. For surely there would be a detour somewhere in the middle of such an extensive repaving job. But Dolan. What about Dolan? What about the 4th vector? 3 times before I could remember him going to LA during the week of the 4th of July. A week which is one of the few slow ones in Las Vegas. I could remember 3 other times when he had gone somewhere else. Once to New York, once to Miami, once all the way to London, and a 4th time when he had simply stayed put in Vegas. If he went, was there a way I could find out? I thought of this long and hard, but 2 visions kept intruding. In the first, I saw Dolan's Cadillac speeding west towards LA along US 71 at dusk, casting a long shadow behind it. I saw it passing Detour ahead signs, the last of them warning CB owners to turn off their sets. I saw the Cadillac passing abandoned road equipment, bulldozers, graders, front-end loaders, abandoned, not just because it was after knocking off time, but because it was a weekend, a 3-day weekend. In the second vision, everything was the same, except the Detour signs were gone. They were gone because I had taken them down. I was on the last day of school when I suddenly realized how I might be able to find out. I had been nearly drowsing, my mind a million miles away from both school and Dolan, when I suddenly sat bolt upright, knocking a vase on the side of my desk. A vase. It contained some pretty desert flowers my students had brought me at the end of the school present. To the floor, where it shattered. Several of my students, who had also been drowsing, also sat bolt upright, and perhaps something on my face frightened one of them, because a little boy named Timothy Urick burst into tears, and I had to soothe him. Sheets, I thought. Comforting Timmy, sheets and pillowcases, and bedding and silverware. The rugs, the grounds, everything has to look just so. He'll want everything just so. Of course, having things just so was as much a part of Dolan as his Cadillac. I began to smile, and Timmy Urick smiled back, but it wasn't Timmy I was smiling at. I was smiling at Elizabeth. School finished on June 10th that year. 12 days later, I flew to Los Angeles. I rented a car and checked into the same cheap hotel I had used on other occasions. On each of the next 3 days, I drove into the Hollywood Hills and mounted a watch on Dolan's house. It could not be a constant watch. That would have been noticed. The rich hire people to notice interlopers, because all too often they turn out to be dangerous, like me. At first there was nothing. The house was not boarded up, the lawn was not overgrown, heaven forbid. The water in the pool was doubtless clean and chlorinated. But there was a look of emptiness and disuse all the same. Shades pulled against the summer sun. No cars in the central turnaround. No one to use the pool that a young man with a ponytail cleaned every morning. I became convinced it was a bust. Yet I stayed, wishing and hoping for the final vector. On the 29th of June, when I had almost consigned myself to another year of watching and waiting and exercising and driving a front-end loader in the summer for Harvey Blocker, if he would have me again, that was, a blue car marked Los Angeles Security Services pulled up at the gate of Dolan's house. A man in a uniform got out and used a key to open the gate. He drove his car in and around the corner. A few moments later, he came back on foot, closed the gate, and relocked it. This was at least a break in the routine. I felt a dim flicker of hope. I drove off, managed to make myself stay away for nearly 2 hours, and then drove back. Parking at the head of the block instead of at the foot this time. 15 minutes later, a blue van pulled up in front of Dolan's house. Written on the side were the words, "Big Joe's Cleaning Service." My heart leaped up in my chest. I was watching in the rearview mirror, and I remember how my hands clamped down on the steering wheel of this rental car. 4 women got out of the van, 2 white, 1 black, 1 Chicana. They were dressed in white, like waitresses. But they were not waitresses, of course. They were cleaning women. The security guard answered when one of them buzzed at the gate and unlocked it. The 5 of them talked and laughed together. The security guard attempted to goose one of the women and she slapped his hand aside, still laughing. One of the women went back to the van and drove it into the turnaround. The others walked up, talking amongst themselves, as the guard closed the gate and locked it again. Sweat was pouring down my face. It felt like grease. My heart was trip-hammering. They were out of my field of vision in the rearview mirror. I took a chance and looked around. I saw the back doors of the van swing open. One of them carried a neat stack of sheets. Another had a towel. Another had a pair of vacuum cleaners. They trooped up to the door, and the guard let them inside. I drove away, shaking so badly I could hardly steer the car. They were opening the house. He was coming. Dolan did not trade in his Cadillac every year, or even every 2. The gray sedan DeVille he was driving as that June neared its end was 3 years old. I knew its dimensions exactly. I had written the GM company for them, pretending to be a research writer. They had sent me an operator's manual and spec sheet for that year's model. They even returned the stamped, self-addressed envelope I had enclosed. Big companies apparently maintain the courtesy even when they're running in the red. I had then taken 3 figures. The Cadillac's width at its widest point, height at its tallest, and length at its longest. To a friend of mine who teaches mathematics at Las Vegas High School, I have told you, I think, that I had prepared for this, and not all my preparation was physical. Most assuredly not. I presented my problem as purely hypothetical one. I was trying to write a science fiction story, I said. And I wanted to have my figures exactly right. I even made up a few plausible plot fragments. My own inventiveness. Rather, I astonished me. My friend wanted to know how fast this alien scout vehicle of mine would be going. It was a question I had not expected, and I asked him if it mattered. Of course it mattered, he said. It matters a lot. If you want the scout vehicle in your story to fall directly into your trap, the trap has to be exactly the right size. Now this figure you're giving me is 17 feet by 5 inches. I opened my mouth to say that wasn't exactly right, but he was already holding up his hand. Just an approximation, he said. Makes it easier to figure the arc. The what? The arc of descent, he repeated, and I cooled off. That was a phrase with which a man bent on revenge could fall in love. It had a dark, smoothing, pretentious sound. The arc of descent. I'd taken it for granted that if I dug that grave so that the Cadillac could fit, it would fit. It took this friend of mine to make me see that before it could serve its purpose as a grave, it had to work as a trap. The shape itself was important, he said. The sort of slit trench I had been envisioning might not work. In fact, the odds of it not working were greater than the odds that it would. If the vehicle doesn't hit the start of the trench dead on, he said, it might not go all the way in at all. It would just slide along on an angle for a while, and when it stopped, all the aliens would climb out the passenger door and zap your heroes. The answer, he said, was to widen the entrance end, giving the whole excavation a funnel shape. Then there was this problem of speed. If Dolan's Cadillac was going too fast and the hole was too short, it would fly across, sinking a bit as it went, and either the frame or the tires would strike the lip of the hole on the far side. It would flip over on its roof, but without falling in the hole at all. On the other hand, if the Cadillac was going too slowly and the hole was too long, it might land at the bottom on its nose instead of its wheels, and that would never do. You couldn't bury a Cadillac with at least 2 feet of its trunk and its rear bumper sticking out of the ground any more than you could bury a man with his legs sticking up. So how fast will your scout vehicle be going? I calculated quickly. On the open highway, Dolan's driver kept it pegged between 60 and 65. He would probably be driving a little slower than that, where I planned to make my try. I could take away the detour signs, but I couldn't hide the road machinery or erase all the signs of construction. About 20 roll, I said. He smiled. Translation, please? Say 50 Earth miles an hour. Aha! He set to work at once with his slip stick while I sat beside him, bright-eyed and smiling, thinking about the wonderful phrase, arc of descent. He looked up almost at once. You know, he said, you might want to think about changing the dimensions of the vehicle, buddy. Oh? Why do you say that? 17 by 5 is pretty big for a scout vehicle, he laughed. That's damn near the size of a Lincoln Mark 4, or no, 6. I laughed too. We laughed together. After I saw the woman going into the house with the sheets and towels, I flew back to Vegas. I unlocked my house, went into the living room, and picked up the telephone. My hand trembled a little. For 9 years. I had waited and watched like a spider in the eaves or a mouse behind the baseboard. I had tried never to give Dolan the slightest clue that Elizabeth's husband was still interested in him. The totally empty look that he had given me that day as I passed his disabled Cadillac on the way back to Vegas. Furious as it had made me at that time, was my just reward. But now, I would have to take a risk. I would have to take it because I could not be in 2 places at the same time, and it was imperative that I know if Dolan was coming, and when to make the detour temporarily disappear. I'd figured out a plan coming home on the plane. I thought it would work. I would make it work. I dialed Los Angeles directory assistance and asked for a number of Big Joe's cleaning service, and I got it, and dialed it. "This is Bill at Rennie's Catering," I said. "We got a party Saturday night at 1121 Esther Drive in Hollywood Hills. I wanted to know if one of your girls would check for Mr. Dolan's big punch bowl in the cabinet over the stove. Could you do that for me?" I was asked to hold on. I did. Somehow, although with the passing of each endless second, I became more and more sure that he had smelled a rat and was calling the phone company on one line while I held on the other. At last, at long last, he came back on. He sounded upset, but that was alright. That was just how I wanted him to sound. "Saturday night?" "Yes, that's right. But I don't have a punch bowl as big as they're going to want unless I call across town. And my impression was they already has one. I'd just like to be sure." "Look, mister, my call sheet says Mr. Dolan ain't expected until 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon. I'll be glad to have one of my girls check out your punch bowl. But I want to straighten this other business out first. Mr. Dolan is not a man to fuck around with, if you pardon my French." "I couldn't agree more with you," I said. "And if he's going to show up a day early, I got to send some more girls out there right away." "Let me double check," I said. The 3rd grade reading textbook I use, Roads to Everywhere, was on the table beside me. I picked it up and riffled some of the pages close to the phone. "Oh boy, I made a mistake," I said. "He's having people in Sunday night. I'm really sorry. You're going to hit me." "Nah, listen. Let me put you on hold. I'll get one of the girls and have her check on the..." "No need if it's Sunday," I said. "My big punch bowl's coming back from a wedding reception in the Glendale Sunday morning." "Okay, take it easy." Comfortable, unsuspicious. The voice of a man who wasn't going to think twice. I hoped. I hung up and sat still, working it out in my head as carefully as I could. To get to LA by 3, he would be leaving Vegas about 10 o'clock Sunday morning. And he would arrive in the vicinity of the detour between 11:15 and 11:30, when traffic was up to be almost non-existent anyway. I decided it was time to stop dreaming and start acting. I looked through the want ads, made some telephone calls, and then went out to look at 5 used vehicles that were within my financial reach. I settled for a battered Ford van that had rolled off the assembly line the same year Elizabeth was killed. I paid cash. I was left with only $257 in my savings account. But this did not disturb me in the slightest. On my way home, I stopped at the rental place, the size of a discount department store, and rented a portable air compressor using my MasterCard as collateral. Late Friday afternoon, I loaded the van. Picks, shovels, compressor, a hand dolly, a toolbox, binoculars, and a borrowed highway department jackhammer with an assortment of arrowhead-shaped attachments made for slicing through asphalt. A large, square piece of sand-colored canvas, plus a long roll of canvas. This later had been a special project of mine last summer. and 21 thin wooded struts, each 5 feet long. Last but not least, a big industrial stapler. On the edge of the desert, I stopped at the shopping center and sold a pair of license plates and put them on my van. 76 miles west of Vegas, I saw the first orange sign, construction ahead. Pass at your own risk. Then a mile or so beyond that, I saw the sign I had been waiting for since, well, ever since Elizabeth died, I suppose. Although I hadn't always known it. Detour ahead, 6 miles. Dusk was deepening towards dark as I arrived and surveyed the situation. It could have been better if I'd planned it. But not too much. The detour was a right turn between 2 rises. It looked like an old fence line road, which the highway department had smoothed and widened to temporarily accommodate the heavier traffic flow. It was marked by a flashing arrow powered by a buzzing battery in the padlock steel box. Just beyond the detour, as the highway rose toward the crest of the second rise, the road was blocked off by a double line of road cones. Beyond them, if one was so extraordinarily stupid as to have, first, missed the flashing arrow, and second, run over the road cones without realizing it, I suppose some drivers were, was an orange sign almost as big as a billboard reading, "Road closed, use detour." Yet the reason for the detour was not visible from here, and that was good. I didn't want Dolan to have the slightest chance of smelling the trap before he fell into it. Moving quickly, I didn't want to be seen at this. I got out of the van and quickly stacked up some dozen of the road cones, creating a lane wide enough for the van. I dragged the road close sign to the right, then ran back to the van, got in, and drove through the gap. Now I could hear an approaching motor. That's going to be the end for this part here for you guys. So that's Dolan's Cadillac, page 80. Finest part here. I will continue down the line soon, so make sure to subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if you made it this far to the end of an hour-long reading of a book. Yes, I understand there's been some mistakes, but we're human. This is all done in one take, no edits, none of that fancy stuff. I want everybody to see exactly how it is to read something for the first time. So, yeah. So, thank you guys all for watching this video. See you guys in the next one. Bye.